Good evening, America. It is 7 p.m. Wednesday, July 15th, and this is Queer News Tonight, the world's first live LGBT daily evening news. It is time to queer up the news.
Watch as we bring you these and other stories from the LGBTQ headlines. Pete Buttigieg has a new role at Catholic Notre Dame, and homophobes are predictably furious. The White House press secretary is proud of Trump's great record when it comes to the LGBT community.
Demi Lovato pays emotional tribute to her on-screen girlfriend, Naya Rivera, for helping closeted queer girls like Demi. Colorado bans gay and trans panic defense in historic move.
And we report that Poland's LGBTQ community feels fear and anger after the presidential election. And only half of Brits would feel comfortable with a transgender prime minister. Transgender prime minister.
That's right.
Good evening, America. It is 7 p.m. Wednesday, July 15th, 2020, and it is time to queer up the news. We are literally out of the closet and into the headlines. So many of your stories we are going to tell this evening on Queer News Tonight. Tonight on the world's first live daily queer evening news show.
Tonight's news about the gay community and the news from an LGBTQ perspective. Are our gay stories important to you? In headlines, politics, entertainment, gay culture, travel, religion, and more. Reported by respected anchors.
Out of the closet and into the headlines on Q News Tonight. Thank you for joining Queer News Tonight. We are live and unedited, so anything can happen tonight. Tonight, we bring you the news of and a perspective from the LGBTQ community. I'm your anchor, Al Ferguson, and this is my co-guest anchor, David Hopkins, and co-guest anchor, Misty Eyes. So let's queer up the news. Tonight, we bring you queer headlines. The LGBTQ community in America is diverse. The LGBTQ community around the world is vast, and we bring you the bullet points of queer news for today, Wednesday, July 15th, 2020. We begin by queering up health in reporting that the White House changes rules on coronavirus reporting to bypass the CDC. Watch this.
Given that cities and states all across the country are now in crisis, now is the time that we should be relying on science. And yet, the Trump administration doesn't seem to share that sentiment. Late this afternoon, the New York Times broke a stunning bit of news about how the White House has further sidelined the CDC. Quote, the Trump administration has ordered hospitals to bypass the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention and beginning on Wednesday, send all coronavirus patient information to a central database in Washington, a move that has alarmed public health experts who fear that the data will be distorted for political gain. Quote, from now on, the Department of Health and Human Services and not the CDC will collect daily reports about the patient that each hospital is treating, how many beds and ventilators are available, and other information vital to tracking the pandemic.
The Trump administration is changing how hospitals are required to send COVID-19 case data to the government, bypassing the U.S. Centers for Disease Control and Prevention in favor of the Department of Health and Human Services. In what cannot be viewed as a coincidence, the administration has said that the records will no longer be viewable by the public after this change. 4 former CDC directors have come out and given harsh criticism over the decision, and sources within the CDC are dismayed at the change.
Here in our wonderful Republican-run state of Florida, our governor, Ron DeSantis, actually fired the woman who was in charge of updating the statistics for COVID because she refused to alter the facts and lessen them.
This news does not surprise me at all, and it's already today hard to find how many new cases happened yesterday.
Mm-hmm. Well, and the situation in terms of improving the pandemic, if you can't do the right governmental things that you should be doing, the next best thing is to lie about the statistics, which is what they are getting ready to do.
Next, we queer up religion. Pete Buttigieg has a new role at Catholic Notre Dame, and homophobes are furious. Watch this.
University of Notre Dame announced last week it will be welcoming former South Bend mayor and 2020 Democratic presidential candidate Pete Buttigieg as a faculty fellow. Buttigieg will be a faculty fellow at the university's Institute for Advanced Study for the coming academic year, where he will work on 2 research projects, join in academic programming, and teach an undergraduate course. As a Democratic candidate for president, Buttigieg ran on an extreme pro-abortion platform by refusing efforts to place any limits on abortion. And during a town hall, the then Democratic candidate said there is no room in the Democratic Party for pro-lifers. His political record is not any better. As mayor of South Bend, Indiana, the home of Notre Dame, Buttigieg vetoed a zoning request by a pro-life pregnancy resource center.
The married gay former presidential candidate and Rhodes Scholar will take up a post at the Notre Dame Institute for Advanced Study, overseeing research on, quote, the forces distinctively shaping the 2020s and looking at ways to restore trust in political institutions. However, the appointment has attracted some predictable responses at the private Catholic Research University. Janet Smith, a former philosophy professor at Notre Dame, raged to anti-LGBTQ website LifeSite News, quote, the fact that the goals of Notre Dame are not the same as those of the gospel becomes clear again with the naming of Pete Buttigieg as a faculty fellow. Both of Buttigieg's parents were long-serving members of the Notre Dame faculty.
This story pleases me to no end. I love Notre Dame, and I'm super glad that they are open-minded enough to hire an LGBTQ person.
To the university professor that raged online, I'm sorry, what's your name again?
Okay.
And to the Catholics and to Notre Dame University, congratulations to you for moving into the 20th century.
Yeah, the video I found for this segment, if you noticed, was from a religious website, and I just loved the craziness on that woman's eyes as she was talking about the fact that somebody who was pro-abortion got assigned a position.
Next, we queer up the USA. White House press secretary is proud of Trump's great record when it comes to the LGBTQ community. Watch this.
Thanks, Kaylee. We're coming up on the 3-year anniversary of the president tweeting he banned transgender people from the military in any capacity, which led to the policy currently in place. Last week, a group of 116 lawmakers led by Congresswoman Del Bene wrote the administration urging them to lift the policy. Would the president reconsider the policy?
I haven't talked to him about that specific policy, but this president is proud that in 2019, we launched a global initiative to end the criminalization of homosexuality throughout the world. He has a great record when it comes to the LGBT community. The Trump administration eased a ban on blood donations from gay and bisexual men, and he launched a plan to end the AIDS epidemic by 2030. So we're very proud of our achievements.
Donald Trump's press secretary dodged a question about the transgender military ban by citing their pride about their record on LGBTQ issues. McEnemy also said, I messed up the name, McEnemy also said that the Bostock ruling, which barred LGBTQ discrimination in the workplace, was not democratic and brought about judicial dictate, implying that the Trump administration plans to keep fighting against court rulings that ban discrimination against LGBTQ people. They're really showing off their fantastic record in real time.
Well, to almost everything that comes out of the White House these days, including the press secretary, if their mouth is moving, they probably aren't saying something truthful.
It's like that song, I know you lie, your lips are moving. Yeah, that's the White House.
Literally, like my co-host, I echo that sentiment as well. But I don't. It amazes me that you could be so anti-LGBTQ and yet in the same breath say, I'm amazing with LGBTQ people. It doesn't make sense.
Next, we queer up entertainment, and reporting Demi Lovato pays an emotional tribute to an on-screen girlfriend, Naya Rivera, for helping closeted queer girls like her. In a tribute to Rivera, who played the sassy and sultry cheerleader Santana Lopez, Lovato wrote about how much Rivera's performance as a queer Latina woman meant to her and the LGBTQ community. In part, she wrote, "Rest in peace, Naya Rivera. I'll forever cherish the opportunity to play your girlfriend on Glee. The character you played was groundbreaking for tons of closeted queer girls like me at the time, and open queer girls And your ambition and accomplishments were inspiring to Latina women all over the world. A beautiful tribute for a life taken too soon by Miss Lovato.
Next week, Queer Up the USA. Colorado bans gay and trans panic defense in historic move. Watch this.
Something that my mother or my father always thought about was, would Matthew's story be my story? Was it safe for me to leave the house?
He's talking about Matthew Shepard, the gay University of Wyoming student who died after being brutally beaten more than 20 years ago, where one of his killers used a gay panic defense in court.
People could use a panic defense to say that that my sexual orientation or my gender identity had something to do with why I was attacked.
Senate Bill 221 says these kinds of justifications for violent actions appeal to irrational fears and hatred and say that legally sanctioned discrimination against sexual orientation or gender identity must end.
In a follow-up to a story that we covered last month, Colorado joined a handful of states in outlawing the gay and trans panic defense on Monday, following the enactment of a new law signed by openly gay Governor Jared Polis. Colorado is just the 11th state in the U.S. to ban the practice, according to the Movement Advancement Project. Others include California, New York, Illinois, Nevada, Washington, Maine, Rhode Island, and New Jersey.
Next we queer up the world. Activists hold first ever Global Black Pride event. Actor Billy Porter is among those who participated in the first ever Global Black Pride event that took place over the weekend. Global Black Gay Men Connect organized the 12-hour virtual event. The first Global Black Gay Pride is a riot with the support of upwards of a dozen LGBTQ advocacy groups. Grindr also provided technical support for the event. Canadian Minister of Diversity and Inclusion Bardish Chager also participated. We hope this is the start of a new trend in this community.
Next, we queer up the world and reporting Poland's LGBTQ community feels fear and anger after the presidential election. In a follow-up to the story Queer News Tonight has been following for months now, members of Poland's LGBTQ community say they are angry and afraid after President Duda won re-election by the tiniest of margins in a diverse campaign that casts their movement for equal rights as a dangerous ideology that threatens families in the deeply Roman Catholic country. Some activists say the homophobic rhetoric that emerged echoes policies in Russia under President Vladimir Putin, who signed a law in 2013 banning gay propaganda, and where the constitution in Russia now bans same-sex marriage. We are watching Poland, and no matter what happens, please know the American LGBTQ community hears you and is with you. Next, let's catch up on all of the news surrounding COVID-19 with our Quarantine Quickies. The first story tonight is our daily reporting of coronavirus facts, especially important to the LGBT community. In beginning facts, we report about Florida Governor DeSantis saying with Vice President Pence, well, hell, coronavirus, it hasn't happened here. Wait, watch this.
Ignoring a pandemic does not make it go away. That's why states like Florida are in such dire straits. Listen to its governor, DeSantis, boasting last month about what great shape Florida was in.
You got a lot of people in your profession who waxed poetically for weeks and weeks about how Florida was going to be just like New York. Wait 2 weeks, Florida's going to be next. Just like Italy, wait 2 weeks. Well, hell, we're 8 weeks away from that, and it hasn't happened.
What now? Shh. Not going to hear him here. You won't see him here. Why? Because he's got nothing to say. When he had a chance to speak, he spoke too soon, he did too little, and now his state is suffering too much. New York's peak in daily cases was what, in April? The 5-day average of daily cases hit almost 10,000. Terrible. Things here still aren't great. We're just moving in the right direction. Florida health officials reported nearly 10,000 new coronavirus cases on Saturday. Its highest single day since the start of the pandemic. He made Trump happy, Governor DeSantis did, and now more Floridians than they can count accurately appear to be safe.
This week, the gayest place on planet Earth experienced its worst week since COVID-19 pandemic began. Yesterday, more people died in South Florida and in the state of Florida than any day of 2020 due to coronavirus. That was, you watched, my Florida Governor, Ron DeSantis, on May 20th, less than 2 months ago. It's crystal clear now that the governor, like Donald Trump, Mike Pence, and unfortunately Ron DeSantis, you all now have blood on your hands that you will never be able to wash off. That is how we begin Coronavirus Facts for the LGBT community for July 15th, 2020. First, we report on coronavirus case numbers. Based on standard acceptance of 7% of the population being LGBT, the world's LGBTQ COVID-19 cases stand at 948,016, while America's LGBT COVID-19 cases stand at 249,539. We remind you that America is still the ground zero of this pandemic. The USA is just 4.4% of the world's population, and today we amount to 26.3% of the world's cases. We report next on coronavirus deaths. The world's LGBTQ COVID-19 deaths stand at 40,830, while America's LGBTQ COVID-19 deaths stand at 9,760. The USA is 23.9% of all of the world's deaths.
Quarantine Quickies. The coronavirus runs into more testing failures. LGBTQ community, beware. Watch this.
Importantly, anybody right now and yesterday, anybody that needs a test gets a test. They're there. They have the tests. And the tests are beautiful. Anybody that needs a test gets a test.
We are reading that testing results here in South Florida, for example, and other places around the country are taking 10, 12, and 14 days. If that's the case, how do we ever get this under control if you take a test, but you don't get your results for 12 or 14 days?
It's a nightmare. I mean, what actually is going on is that we are once again suffering a shortage of testing materials. You certainly can't do contact tracing. It becomes useless at that point because whoever's going to get infected will have been infected and well into the disease process by that point. We were informed by Quest yesterday that they will no longer supply test kits to anybody but the hospitals and the county official testing sites. Why is a county testing site where somebody has to sit out in the hot sun for 3 hours better than my patients coming to me where we test them in 5 minutes? A lot of the delays in reporting have to do with the fact that the labs are overwhelmed. So, I think we're in a terrible situation with testing that's getting worse and not being addressed in a constructive way.
Months after our esteemed President Donald Trump allayed concerns about testing being available, our very own Dr. Howard Grossman revealed on last night's show that there are already early warning signs that the supplies required to test are going to become scarce soon. With the White House's decision to hide the information about COVID-19 from the public eye that we covered early, we have to wonder if the LGBTQ community can really consider themselves safe while this president sits in office.
This is disgusting to me. What really bothers me is my husband is a security guard and somebody in his job tested positive. Everyone on that site was suspended until they came back with a negative test. If testing is very limited, how are people that need testing to work going to be able to find testing?
That comment that you heard from President Trump is it's approaching 5 months ago. And you heard just yesterday what Dr. Grossman said about our testing situation, and the average wait time is 10 to 12 days. Anything that is being said about COVID from official White House sources is likely not true.
Just today, I lost a friend in North Florida who worked in the education system because somebody he worked with was tested and did not find out they were positive for over a week and a half. It's a serious issue that is taking people in our community's lives, and our government doesn't care at this point.
Quarantine Quickies. Moderna COVID-19 vaccine trial results could be big news for LGBTQ community. Watch this.
In the race to develop a coronavirus vaccine, the first vaccine tested in this country is set to begin its final phase of testing later this month. Moderna published its phase 1 results in a peer-reviewed journal. All 45 volunteers who received this vaccine produced an immune response and showed no serious safety concerns. The vaccine was developed with the National Institutes of Health. Our Dr. David Agus joins us now to discuss that story. David, good morning to you. It sure sounds promising, is it?
Yeah, this is the first U.S. trial. It is a phase 1. It is very small, 45. By comparison, the Oxford vaccine is in 14,000 patients, so very different than the 45 here. But what they showed in the New England Journal of Medicine is very good antibody responses and some T-cell responses. So they're mimicking what happens when you have the virus with a little bit stronger antibody responses. So it's about as good as we could hope for from a phase 1 clinical trial. And now we go to the pivotal study.
The first COVID-19 vaccine tested in the U.S. revved up people's immune systems just the way scientists had hoped. Researchers reported Tuesday the shots are poised to begin key final testing. No matter how you slice this is good news, said Dr. Anthony Fauci, who commented upon hearing this news. There's no guarantee, but the government hopes to have results around the end of the year, which would be record-setting speed for developing a vaccine.
It's amazing news. In fact, one of the most positive things that I've heard in the COVID pandemic. The study was small, but now they're going to do the next phase study, which is going to include 30,000 people, and they're moving as fast as possible. So even Fauci saying something by the end of the year is really encouraging news.
And if you have not watched our quarantine Q&A that was on yesterday, Dr. Grossman also discusses this. A vaccine's going to help a lot, but it being rushed so quickly, we don't know how long it'll be effective for once you take it.
Yeah.
I will take optimism and hope in any way, shape, and form, and this is good news.
Yeah. Next, we queer up, speaking of that, our segment called Good News. After we finish our headlines, we like to lighten it up. We want to report on something that made us smile today in Good News.
Good news. Scream in your heart. Officials in Japan have said that when visiting theme parks, you can prevent spreading COVID-19 by, quote, screaming in your heart instead of out loud. The looks of terror on the face of these silent businessmen made us laugh, and that's why it's good news. Watch this. While to prevent spreading COVID, you want to scream in your heart, sometimes voices need to be heard. And that's why tonight we're broadcasting from our studio set in the middle of the World AIDS Museum and Education Center. The museum is in Wilton Manors in Fort Lauderdale, Florida.
We joke that we're coming from the gayest place on planet Earth.
We'd also like to thank our set designer, Concepto Modern Living here in Fort Lauderdale, for making this set in this living museum possible. We end tonight's broadcast with The Big Finish, short story mentions of LGBTQ news or news with a gay perspective. So here we go, first on Queer News Tonight's The Big Finish. Baby crocodiles line up like a tiny army on the banks of a river.
As resident nerd, I do have to point out that this photo is of baby gharials, not crocodiles, but they're so adorable.
Oh my goodness, so adorable. Who knew Asian crocodiles were so much cuter than ours?
And as a fan of Florida State and the Seminoles, I'm not doing a chop anymore, by the way. I have a very strong dislike for any sort of legged reptile, but these are adorable. In the big finish, Jeff Sessions, crocodile tears, loses the Alabama GOP Senate runoff to Trump-backed Tommy Tuberville.
So we're replacing a guy who reminds me of Gollum with a guy who reminds me of the governor from the best little whorehouse in Texas.
So this is a classic story of the enemy of my enemy is now my friend. Okay, so I'm going to back you now since I don't like that one.
I have to prepare you, America. I'm in a really bad mood today.
He always is.
Jeff Sessions, the first senator to wear the MAGA hat in 2015. What did that loyalty, Jeff, get you from Trump? Scorn, shame, humiliation. Jeff Sessions, you were anti-LGBTQ. You changed the definition of justice in America as Trump's attorney general. And now you've lost your bid to return to the Senate, representing the great state of Alabama. He lost. Big. You're done. And on behalf of the entire LGBTQ community, may I proudly say goodbye, good night, and we won't miss you. The big finish. Only half of Brits would feel comfortable with a transgendered prime minister.
So I feel like this is intended to be bad news, but since both Boris Johnson and Donald Trump currently have lower approval ratings than that, it seems like good news to me.
Absolutely. This is amazing news. And if half of the population is already comfortable with the idea of a trans person, now the trans person has to do extra work to get the other half to approve them.
Oh, I continue to be in a bad mood because it's the exact opposite observation of Misty's. I'm sorry that slightly more than half of Brits feel comfortable with Boris Johnson as prime minister. You and your buddy, DT, are certainly out of the same mold. Trans? Really, UK? That's your problem? All you need to do is look across the channel to Europe. They are all laughing about your Brexit. Yeah, trans really seems to be your big problem. The big finish. Top Trump advisor publishes an op-ed against Dr. Anthony Fauci. He has been wrong about everything.
Oh, Peter Navarro, of course I'm going to trust an economist about disease instead of an infectious disease doctor.
Exactly, dude. Stay in your lane. Since when are you a doctor? And I have learned that in the past, when a person uses absolutes, always, everything, never, it's usually personally motivated and not factual at all. So you want me to believe nothing that has ever come out of Dr. Fauci's mouth in the history of ever? Nothing? Ever?
Misty, David, did I tell you I'm kind of in a bad mood today?
We've noticed.
It's probably going to be the final straw for suburban women, independents, and Republicans that are embarrassed over the ignorance in our party. Oh, wait, yes, our party. The attack on medical science by Trump and his ignorant cronies is going to be the death of their reelection. Truth wins. Darkness can sometimes gain a foothold through lies, but has always ultimately been defeated. Dr. Fauci has been a ray of truth in the worst health crisis in a century because he told the truth. The big finish. Sex writer Bobby Box says quarantine made him a better bottom.
I mean, it's a simple fact of life. If you want to be any good at being a top, you need to learn to bottom.
That's true. To be a good leader, you have to be a good follower and vice versa. But is he confusing the sexual position of bottom with being domesticated and cleaning his house?
Once again, did I mention I'm in a bad mood? Is sex writer Bobby Box speaking Latin? That's not what I learned in COVID-19 pandemic.
Maybe it's time you learned to bottom.
That's not what I learned in pandemic. The big finish. Today, oh my goodness, is National Hot Dog Day.
Speaking of, every gay man loves a sausage fest. So if you want to come over for some brats and beer, I got a nice juicy wiener I'd love to slip into a hot bun.
Ew.
I'm talking about food, you perverts.
Ooh.
You look like the 4th of July. It makes me want a hot dog real bad. I love hot dogs, but I will say my favorite, and I know we just talked negatively about them, but my favorite hot dog ever was a kielbasa I had in Poland.
Yes. What was? No, the joke's too easy. Oh, wait, I'm starting to feel a little better. I'm not very well versed in the art of eating a hot dog, but I have known some very nice young men who could certainly pack away a mouthful in my presence.
He paid them. And that's today's news for the LGBTQ community on the world's first daily LGBTQ evening news show.
Remember, if it's important to the LGBTQ community, it's important to Queer News Tonight. But you must help us. Please click subscribe on YouTube and share this news.
We are literally out of the closet and into the headlines, and this is the only source of live LGBT news in the entire world. Your community needs your support.
You're not alone. We will get through this crisis.
We are here with you, and this is Queer News Tonight.
So thank you for joining us. I'm Al Ferguson, and on behalf of my two co-partners, this will be the last night you see them, Misty Eyes and David Hopkins. We will see you daily and tomorrow night at 7 p.m. Good night.
Good night.